you know what happens when you Google on Google? Only Google results return. No sponsored adverts. Isn't that convenient? Please welcome Ailish English.
This at all. Good morning, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Definitely beats Stormbird to be here in sunny Cyprus. So huge thank you to Jet2 for this amazing few days and for having everyone here. As the intro suggests, I'm Ailish English. I am an industry manager at Google and I work across the travel industry. So at Google, as you can imagine, we spend a lot of time looking at consumer trends and particularly what consumers are doing online. And that is exactly what I'd like to share with you this morning. So, this slide. As we tend to do at this time of year, it's a time of reflection. So we're going to have a quick look back on what we've seen in the travel industry in 2024. We're then going to pivot and think about what that means for 2025. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how the customer is evolving from what we can see and their behaviors online. And then we're going to think about how Google as an organization is thinking and planning to adapt to how the customer is changing online. And then finally, we're going to think about, well, what does that mean for you guys, for travel agents, heading on into 2025? So first of all, one notable change in 2024 was that we had a shift to a late market. We always have a late market, but it was more pronounced in 24, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that now. So at a higher level, across the whole of Europe, over the last 12 months, we've seen an increase in searches year over year. Now at Google, when we talk about an increase in searches, that's because we measure volumes in every category. And we look at them in over 6 months and over 12 months. So when I'm talking about searches, this is what I mean. So particularly for air and for car rental, actually, we saw a very buoyant year across Europe, but for all categories we were up. And that's quite significant, given 2023 had huge growth coming out of COVID, that we were still seeing a lot of buoyancy in the market in 2024. Now, last year, according to Mintel, in May, people were surveyed, and they reckoned that about 87% of people were planning on taking a holiday in the next 12 months, which is obviously good news for everybody here. That was up 5% on the year before, which I believe was 82%. Now, what people have also been doing is when they were looking at package holidays and also individual holidays, they weren't just thinking about wanting to take more holidays. Those searches were also up, but the biggest trend that was a shift to value. So they wanted more value than ever from their holiday that they were going to take in the next 12 months. Now, value doesn't necessarily mean a cheap deal. It means what they were looking for and what they could get for what their price point was. So I've already mentioned that there was a shift to a late market this year. So that what we saw actually in the UK, which is here, is that in May, when Google surveyed lots of people with intent to travel in the next 3 months, in the UK, 40% of people had still not booked the holiday they had planned on taking over the summer months. And then actually, we ran this exact survey again in July, and it had only dropped by 2%. So there was still 38% of people in market who wanted to take a holiday but hadn't actually booked yet. So I think this was the real start of that late market that we all would have seen over the summertime. Which then brought us to, in H2 of this year, we saw that clicks on holiday terms, so when people were searching for holidays, we saw that was 8% higher than the year before because people still yet hadn't booked holidays and they were really in market to search for their summer holiday. Now, not only were they searching, they were actually spending too, because as of October, we saw Barclaycard data told us that actually holiday spending was up significantly year over year in the UK, and particularly for flights. That was up 9.3% year over year, which is actually quite a significant amount. So that's 2024. What does that mean going into 2025? Well, first of all, good news. The economy and consumer confidence is starting to, it's on the up. So we're seeing the consumer confidence index is definitely on the increase. We're also seeing inflation is significantly down and that we hope that to continue into 2025, down to 2.1%. So good news for anybody with mortgages. And also GDP is set to rise by 16% in 2025. So overall, the economy is looking in a much better place and we've got tailwinds heading on in. This very messy slide, which I really hate, I'm really going to have to reconfigure this, is a way of looking at what we do at Google. Is everybody familiar with Google Flights? When you can go onto Google and book a flight? So what we actually do is harness that data, and that data can tell us from the moment that somebody searches for a flight, so my flight to Paphos, to when they actually are going to fly, the duration of time, and that look-ahead window is what we call it. And that changes significantly over time. It's quite an interesting one. So what we're seeing is next year we're expecting about a 70-day window from when somebody first searches a flight to when they actually fly. Again, now to go into this muddle of mess, what we're seeing over here, just to highlight, is that in kind of January time, February time, the usual seasonality, we see that people are looking to book 3 to 6 months out, but actually then in the summer period, again, coming in the green line, what we're actually seeing is that people are only looking to book 1 to 3 months. So all traditional and what we are expected to see, but it is definitely worth thinking about when people are actually in market and how long ahead they're going to book. What we're also expected to see between now and 2027 is actually a huge boost to tourism across the whole of Europe. What we're expecting is about a 37% increase in spending, which is actually a very, very significant amount, as you can well imagine. So now is not the time to change career anyone, stick with travel. It's all going to be very buoyant. Now, we've talked a lot about kind of these big growth rates, exponential growth that we will have seen. A lot of those kind of big numbers were driven on the back of COVID, and of course, people wanting to get out there and travel. We are still expecting to see big numbers in terms of growth, but it will normalize. It has started to normalize, and we do expect that the high growth rates to slide down. We're expecting at around 2030 to be in or around 5% annual growth in travel spending year over year. But we'll take 5%, right? Now, so that's all about getting to our destinations and what we're about to spend. What do we think is going to happen when we get there? Good news for anybody who's looking at what's happening in resort. We're expecting about a 22% increase in what's spent in resort from now again until 2027. So people are going and they are spending. What kind of holidays are they thinking about? Well, we've actually again done some surveying. And what we're seeing is in the next 6 months, people are predominantly looking at number 1, city breaks, and number 2, beach holidays. Lots of other holidays, but city breaks and beach holidays, which is well placed for Jet2, who offer, as we know, fabulous products across both. This one really, I find quite interesting. Clearly, there's a lot more Gavins in this world because what people are actually looking for and what we expect more of in 2025 is that real luxury experience. So they're looking for jacuzzis, they're looking for spas, Michelin star restaurants, 5-star accommodation. So we mentioned earlier that people are looking for value, and they are, but they're looking for the best experience that they can have for their price point. So they really want to kind of feel that they're having a luxurious holiday. Of course, this is a forecast, and best laid forecasts can often change, as we all know. So some things that may change kind of that very, optimistic forecast for 2025 is more economic uncertainty, instabilities and conflicts, political instabilities. Extreme weather concerns is definitely something that would not have been on this slide 10 years ago, and labour strikes. Now, I do want to caveat that this data was pulled before the US recent presidential election, so I do wonder if there would be a flip with 1 or 2 there, but anyhow. So that's what we're expecting in 2025. Now, I want to pivot slightly to think about, well, this is all great, this is well and good, what does that mean for our actual customer? So first of all, to note, customers are spending more time researching products online and researching their holidays than they used to, than ever before. Now, James just showed us a mind-blowing presentation about how Jet2 are using search in a really, they're really at the forefront of how they've been thinking about how to make the most of what people are doing their research and providing a product that is really able to, to be able to present such fantastic kind of a wealth of material and content online and be able to do it in such a streamlined way. But that is what people are beginning to now, that they want to access this information and they're investing the time to find out more information. Remember, looking for that value piece for their holiday. But, however, James also mentioned that when we're thinking about AI and we're thinking about technology, we think about the problems that is causing for the individual customer. So in this case, although there is far more information available online than there ever was before, it's actually making it harder for people to make a decision and feel confident with their decision. So therefore, I think there's a real place for all of you guys to think about this and understand that how can you access information with the likes of obviously Jet2's fabulous new search portals, but to think about how can you best service the customer so that when they leave your shop, that they are feeling super confident that they are getting the best value, they've made the right decision and they're done. This is it, this is my holiday. I don't want to look any further. So that's something to be thinking about, I think, going into next year. And actually, what we've seen is, if we go back 10 years to 2015, when people were doing their online research, they were looking at about 10 travel brands. Roll on, and this is actually only going to 2022, we need to refresh this data, but what we saw in 2022 was we were up to 16 different travel brands, and there's a new report coming out that this has actually increased again, and we've gone up again by 1 or 2 points. So people are not as brand loyal as they used to be previously. They are out there and they are searching and they're willing to put in the legwork to find that fabulous experience for them, to find that value. So again, thinking about how can you as a brand, as a travel agent, make sure that you're capturing that person when they're out there looking, but that also that when they come to you, that's it, they're happy with their final decision. Now, I'm probably going to get a little bit into the detail here, but I think it's an interesting one. So at Google, when we talk about search terms, I mentioned we measure the volume of people searching. We bucket that into 2 categories. And the first one is generic searches. So what we mean by generic searches is a search, so for instance, a holiday in Cyprus, holiday in Paphos, an all-inclusive holiday. And then, so that's a generic search because there's no branded words in there. And then a branded search term would be a Jet2 holiday, Jet2 all-inclusive holiday, or the Athena Royale Hotel in Paphos. So using a brand name. So again, this is probably not revolutionary at all, but it's really interesting to see it play out in the data. So if we look right where we are now, around November time, you'll see that when people are actually searching and looking online for their holidays for next year, they're looking at kind of a broad, they're more higher level with their searches. So they're looking at generic terms and they're taking in all of their options in generic terms. But then, as we go into what we would think traditionally peaks, so the minute January kicks in, you can see a sharp drop in people looking at generic terms and a nice incline in what they're doing in looking at branded terms because they've done their research. They've spent October and November looking for the different holidays that are out there. So then when January comes, they're ready to pounce straight in with their brand because they know what they're doing. So to think about it, when people are looking off-season, they might not be buying. So for you as a travel agent, how can you make sure that you're getting your brand out there front and center when people are not ready to buy, but they're in that research phase, so that when we come into January, our peaks, when people are ready to go, that your brand is what they're confident and your brand is number 1 for them. So just something interesting that I thought was worth actually sharing is that although we know that the travel season is the travel year is quite seasonal, we've got our big peak, and then we've got kind of our bit of winter sun, we've got a lull, we have summer, and then we have another lull and we have peaks again. And that's what you can see play out in how people search online. So people were searching with intent with holidays. That really dips up and down and peaks again in January time. But the blue line is actually people watching travel content on YouTube. So that's actually relatively flat. So people are thinking about their holidays and traveling all year long, as you can see, even though they might not actually be in the market to actually buy a holiday at that particular point in time. So it's thinking about how can you be sure, again, that you are capturing, you're capturing those moments when people are not actually buying, but they're just thinking about travel. Now, James mentioned earlier about, all the advances in AI and how to think about, much easier and cheaper ways to be able to produce some really good content and put it up on social media or whatever it might be. And I think this is something that I would really kind of like you to think about, that you can see that people are online consuming travel content all year long. So it's important to be getting out there and using those online platforms to be able to engage with your customer, building that rapport, again, making sure that you are front and center when they do actually want to buy. Oh, I'm in the ray again. Right. I think it would be remiss of me to talk about consumer behavior shifting without talking about Black Friday, which is tomorrow. I think Black Friday started out obviously in the States, and it was a very US retail-focused phenomenon. I'll tell you a true story. 19 years ago today, on Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving to any US folk here, I traveled to the States for my first shopping experience in New York with my mum and all of her friends. We went on Thanksgiving because the flights were cheaper, and I had no credit card, so I got into the bank and I changed all my dollars, and I went over with 2 empty suitcases and a load of dollars, cash. And we arrived and we were waiting outside of Macy's on Friday morning for Black Friday. But we'd never heard of Black Friday. Well, when the doors opened, there was thousands of people flooding into. We were nearly trampled on. It was like a scrum, trampled on to get all the bargains. And that was my first experience of Black Friday. Now, little did I know that actually, 19 years later, it would be such a big phenomenon. Now, you might think, oh, it's just for retail now in the UK. Yes. Has anybody been shopping for Black Friday? Yes, hands up. Yes, I think I've learned a lesson from last night. A glass of wine and an empty hotel room and a laptop, not a good idea. I did a bit of damage. Anyhow, so Black Friday, right? So we're seeing spikes. This is from last year's data primarily, because this time next year, I am pretty sure that when I show you this graph again, there will be an even bigger spike. We saw last year data, 57% increase on the year before. I can tell you that at the big, and this is actually for travel data, not retail data, travel data, and in the UK. What I can tell you is, at the beginning of November, Black Friday queries were already up 7.3% on last year, and that was at the beginning of November. So I'm really interested to kind of look back on the data that we have now next week when I can see what actually came in for Black Friday. So I think Black Friday is definitely a shift that we didn't have previously. I think what it means for travel is it's creating another little mini peak at this side of Christmas or this side of actual peaks. So it's something to be thinking about. And what's also interesting is, back to that whole value piece, people feel, I'm sure you all feel, that you should be buying something in Black Friday. And if you're not, well, then why aren't you when you feel a bit of pressure to spend? So it's a little bit the same for the travel market and for holidays. When people are looking, they're not necessarily sure when they're about to travel, where they want to go, what it might be, but they are looking for travel content. Now, again, I will come back to what we were talking about earlier when we mentioned that even though we know that people are online, they are buying holidays at this time of year. If they're not buying a holiday, they are still looking. So just thinking about, again, using your content, using social media to be out there, putting out, great kind of engaging messages with your clients, so that or with your customer base. So if they don't buy now, they will be ready to buy in January. So this brings me to a little bit again of a shift. So we've been talking about how how consumers are consuming travel content and how their search behavior for holidays has been changing. it's actually been changing quite significantly in terms of how they're looking for it. And I think James did a great job of setting me up earlier by talking about what Jet2 have done here in this space. So what we are seeing is, so traditionally, you would have typed in holiday in Cyprus. You would have typed in an all-inclusive holiday. But what we can see that, from what James showed earlier, you can see now you can be a lot more specific about, on the Jet2 website, a lot more specific about what you actually want to search for, whether it's a kids club, Gavin wants his champagne when he's all-inclusive, you can have nighttime entertainment, you want all of that for half board, whatever it might be. But we're seeing that as well in regular Google search. So what we're seeing is double-digit growth in queries, so the words that people are putting in for one search that are more than 8 words. So people are thinking about, in lots of ways, AI is fantastic, but it's spoiling us. So we're almost expecting more, we're expecting AI to do more and more for us. We're giving it more complicated, complex queries, and we're expecting something more back from, so it's changing how we're searching. We're making it longer and more, our searches are longer and more conversational. So I want you to hold that thought, because I'm now going to go into what Google has been doing or has been thinking about in how to adapt to the needs of the changing customer. So search, I've just spoken about it, is evolving in 2 major ways. The first one is the kinds of questions that we can ask. And the second one is the kind of results that Google are now in a position to be able to show our customers. The queries are getting longer and they're getting more complex. James showed lots of examples. Here we can see that people are, sometimes they're really long, sometimes they're really itty-bitty. But no matter what their queries are, they're now expecting Google to be able to pick them up and give them really, really strong results. We talked about longer queries. Well, what I can tell you is, in the last 6 months alone, queries, so that's the number of words that are in a particular search, have actually grown by 1.5 times, and that's in 6 months. We are expecting that rate of change to continue. So there's real exponential growth in how people are actually putting in their queries, that conversational aspect, and what they're expecting back. And then every day, globally, Google experience 15% new queries. That's net new queries that have never been seen before. So I think this really, to me, shows the curiosity of customers, how much they're engaging with, online, how much they're engaging with Google, and how much, again, that shift is actually changing in terms of how they're searching. Now, so that's what's happening with online searches. So how have Google been thinking about changing their core product to be able to match the changing needs of customers? Has anybody seen AI overviews when they search for something? Hands up? Okay, most people have seen them by now. So this is the biggest change that Google has made to their core product, which is Google Search, that we're all familiar with, in 20 years. And that's because we're really cognizant of how people are changing the way they search. Now, so traditionally, you would have done your search, and you would have experienced lots of blue links. Some of them might be ads, some of them organic searches, and that's what you would have been given in response to your holiday in Cyprus query. Whereas now, when you put in a complex query into Google Search, Google is actually using AI to summarize what's across the web and surfacing you the most relevant content, giving you a much richer experience, and serving you links throughout that to be able to kind of prompt you for more searches, rather than just showing you the traditional blue links that we would have shown previously. So that is a huge shift in how we're evolving our search. We've been testing it in the US, it's now rolled out in the UK, and I think there'll be a lot more on how we're using AI to adapt our core products going into 2025 and beyond. It's not only how people are searching using words that are actually changing. We've seen some really big changes in how people are using image searches. We're getting over 20 billion image searches globally now, month over month, and this is a huge increase in what we would have had previously. So what Google have been doing to adapt to this shift is, has anybody seen circle to search? where if you have a couple of people, so where if you see something online, maybe on an influencer, and you liked her sunglasses in this instance, or a bag, or whatever it might be, you can actually, using an Android phone, just do a circle around that particular, I've used this, again, it's cost me more money with my shopping habit, but you can actually just circle an item and it will bring up, shopping that you're familiar with, the links to where you can actually buy that particular object. So that's one thing. Another area actually where we've made huge, using AI to make huge improvements is our Google Lens. So if anybody has a Google phone and you hold your camera to an object, in this instance it's a flower, it can just by holding the camera, it will come straight in and provide you lots of information about that particular flower, and it can identify what the particular flower or anything actually that it might be. And I think this is a really interesting one. My husband is an engineer, and he works for himself actually, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but it's just about thinking about how an independent businessman can think about using Google in the way that you need to, to be able to make sure that he's found online. But so here, he actually uses this when he's surveying a house or a building. He'll actually use Google Lens to look at the different plants and the trees that are growing outside, because actually certain trees can provide real structural damage to buildings. So he used to have different software that he used previously to do this, whereas now he can use Google Lens and it's just as accurate as the software that he was paying for before. So it's actually super useful and super accurate. So that's Google Lens. We also have Search with Video. And Search with Video is where we can actually use a real live video to be able to kind of talk about our surroundings. And I do kind of want to take a moment to talk about how these products are evolving so much and so quickly. As James did allude to, we did have when he showed you the giraffe video, we were doing air pumps and air fists, the whole lot, thinking about how cool this was, and that wasn't even 2 years ago. And we've really evolved to where we are today with all of this fabulous functionality. And yes, Google has really evolved also, and our text to video is a lot better than it was with the giraffe and the blue balloon a couple of years ago. But so these are how areas where we've been fundamentally shifting our product to be able to better meet the customer changing expectations that are out there. So that's what Google have been doing. How can we think now about what you can do for 2025? So what do we know? We know that there is great tailwinds going in. We know that people have intent to go on holidays over the next 12 months. We know that they're spending more time searching online, and we know that they're looking for value. So how can we be sure that we're making that journey easy for our customers? How can you as travel agents make sure that you can attract them, use these nuggets to attract people into your shop, but also to give them the confidence to know that they've got the best deal for their budget when they leave the shop? We've showed you how consumer behavior is changing, and that big companies like Google and also Jet2, we've had to shift our product and how we've been thinking about the customer. So I think, which kind of I think probably will filtrate into how everybody should be thinking about servicing the customer and meeting those changing expectations. James, again, to come back to that mentioning about the problem, it's great that people can access all this data, but how can you, as travel agents, you have the relationships, you have great tools available to you now using AI. You guys have those relationships. How can you really leverage those, marry the two of them together to really give your customer that really elite service level? It's something to be thinking about going into next year. Yeah, and finally then, how are you planning on changing consumer behavior to increase sales into 2025? Because this is all very, very interesting. Lots of trends, lots of stats, but it's about going back after this fabulous break is over and thinking about, right, we're in November, traditionally would have been quiet, but we know people are looking. What can I do with my social media accounts? How can I be sure I'm front and center? And making sure then that you're not just teasing people, but that we are actually closing out the deal going into next year. And I do want to, if I may, take one moment to talk about what James mentioned about Google My Business. It wasn't actually in my presentation, but I think it was really interesting because, as I mentioned, I work in Google. I have all of this wonderful tech available to me. But my husband is a one-man band, and he set up last year, used to work in big engineering companies, for the first time. And he found it quite overwhelming. How does one guy in southwest London compete with all these huge, world-famous engineering companies in London? So actually, it was really about kind of breaking down all of the things that you can do to increase your online presence so that he does come up for Google searches. So making sure you have really relevant Google My Business pages, put in all that local, because he's the same. He really has to dial up how he's an expert in kind of the local housing of our area, and he spent a lot of time rewriting his website now using Google Gemini, not ChatGPT, to do that. But and you can use these tools to really help you get it. And I use them all the time for writing emails now, and for help with creating presentations, etc. So use what's available, and then just tailor it so that it really has the right voice for your brand. So thinking about that. Going into next year, and using images and videos, and most importantly, get those reviews. So make sure that you're asking people to put in those reviews, because I can tell you from my own husband's experience, it makes such a difference. Not only can people see them and Google My Business, but also it really does help improve your SEO ranking. And it might seem overwhelming when you think about it, but they're all small things that can be done. Spend a day or two thinking about your content. How can you be more user-friendly? Is there anything in AI that's available for you? You don't need to spend money. There's lots of tools that are self-serve and available for you. And thinking about that and how you can really leverage all of that to get ahead and give the customer exactly what they didn't even know they wanted in 2025. Thank you.